that was not the Holy Spirit. That was the spirit of dramatic people. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I am dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And in this episode, I'm going to encourage every Catholic to get rid of drama. What do I mean by that? Well, we'll find out. But before we do, please make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. Your engagement helps us to overcome the algorithms that truly want to suppress good, Catholic, balanced, pastoral, practical content. And the only way we can do shows like this is with your support. Please make sure you visit us at patreon.com/thefatherleo show. You can subscribe at any level, but if you support us with a monthly gift, you'll get access to some great content, extra content, as well as some special perks. We're even going to be trying to start a more kind of engagement with all of our Patreon members by even having either meet and greets for you all, but you're all over the place, but even some live discussions where we can kind of just do like a live show and I can interact with you there. But we're going to try to figure out how best to do it, but just go to patreon.com/thefatherleo show so that we can do that. And guess what? In so doing, we can get rid of Catholic drama. Let me explain what I mean in this understanding of faith, culture, and my commentary. Let me start off by saying that Catholic drama is real. It's very, very real. But what do I mean by it? Well, there could be a few ways that we understand it, because we just know that there are some people who are very dramatic. Some people would even call me dramatic. I don't know if that's the case, because I don't like to bring a lot of drama, but I don't mind bringing in a little theatrics. There's difference between theatrics and drama. Theatrics happens when you are, say, on a stage or in a position where people are looking at you, and you do certain things in order to keep their attention, whether it be an affect in my voice, whether it be a story that I tell in a kind of a different way, more emotional way. If the story is sad, then I have to actually kind of sound sad. But if the story is funny, I've got to actually be funny about it. That's theatrics. I mean, theatrics is what I would do if I'm doing a cooking demonstration at a big event, for example, at the Eucharistic Congress in Indianapolis in 2024, I believe that's when it was. There was a big stage. There were thousands of people there, and I had to cook. And I was lighting stuff on fire. I was chopping really fast. I was tossing food in the air. That's theatrics. But when people meet me, like in normal life, I'm usually just so tired that I don't want to be funny. I don't want to tell any more stories. I just kind of want to be left alone. Because to be honest with you, I can't stand the drama. So what exactly is this drama that I'm talking about? Well, drama could be described as just creating attention around you by trying to get emotional responses from other people. That's why telenovelas or soap operas are so dramatic. I mean, everyone there is like a drama king, a drama queen, a dramatic person. It's where their emotions need the emotions of other people. And usually the emotion is attention, annoyance, sympathy. Like they come into a room and all they want is just your attention. I don't want people to pay attention to me when I come into a room, unless, of course, the room is there for me because I have to speak. So it's kind of a funny thing for me, because if I'm invited to, say, like an event, say I'm invited to be a keynote speaker somewhere, and I do this a lot. I'm invited to be a keynote speaker to, say, I don't know, like raise money for a group, or they invite me to be a keynote speaker because they have a major conference and they want me to speak, and I'm very honored to do it. And there might be a side of me that appreciates when I walk in, people are like, "Oh, great, Father Leo, you are here." But to answer my prayer for humility, and because I do pray for humility every day, and I can't stand it when Jesus answers my prayers, There have been times when I've walked into like a church where I am the preacher for their mission. And the sacristan looks at me and says, "Who are you?" Like, I'm the guy whose face is on the bulletin because I'm your mission preacher. What are you talking about? But you know what? If I did that, then I would be dramatic. It would be my emotions, which are unchecked, needing the emotions of others. That can be a way to understand drama. But the reason why I bring this up is because of an experience that I've had in many situations where people's drama kind of affected me in a way, in a negative way. So I'm going to show you this video, and I'm just going to draw out hopefully some salient points. And you're going to see some serious drama in this video. Check it out. You're thinking, what the heck did my eyes just see? Well, this video was obviously at a Pentecostalist church, or at least a very charismatic, perhaps Protestant community, more than likely Protestant. And the little graphic there said Holy Spirit. And I can tell you, that was not the Holy Spirit. That was the spirit of dramatic people. Because drama, again, taps into an emotional need. And that emotional need seeks the emotional attention of others. What you saw were kids praying over a young boy. Now, I don't exactly know who this young boy was or the reason for prayers. Maybe this kid is sick and they wanted to pray over him, and therefore they were pouring. Or maybe this kid was struggling with something personal or in his family life, and so they wanted to pray over him. People ask me to pray over them all the time. And people constantly ask to pray over me. And that's fine too, because it's their way of, when people ask me to pray over them, it's their way of asking not my personal prayer. Sure, it's going to come from me personally, but it's because of my priestly mission to help bless and sanctify, which is a very different thing. My role as a priest is to be a sanctifier, to make things holy, because that's my charge in life. And there have been times, honestly, when I have gotten emotional praying for someone. Like there was a time when I prayed over a man who was in a car accident, and he was dying before my eyes. He probably was already dead, to be honest with you. And I remember just feeling emotion because that moment was so truly dramatic. It was just one of those very stark, in your face moments. And there have been times when I've prayed over, say, like a married couple who I know, and they're just such faithful, beautiful young people. And there have been times when I've gotten emotional. I've done a funeral mass for a very young girl who died from cancer. And as I looked at the family and friends gathered there, I got emotional. And as I was praying over the body, it can happen sometimes, for sure. But that should not be the reason for wanting to pray. I think that people have become just so numb that they just want to feel something, and they chalk it up to the Holy Spirit. So what we've got to do is kind of break something down, because I'm not here to make fun of this situation. I'm here to understand what was going on. These children are being taught that their emotions are a result of the Holy Spirit. The problem is that's only partially true. So what we have to do is break this down so that we don't become drama queens, drama kings, dramatic people, because honestly, it just is so emotionally draining. And there's a lot of drama in the world. We don't need dramatic people. And why? Because it's coming from a place of emotional unintelligence. Unintelligence. So the first thing that I'm going to offer is a book called Emotional Intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a way to better understand what we're feeling. And there's been a couple additions to this. Gosh, Daniel Coleman, I believe, is one of the people who wrote this book the first time. I know that there's a whole bunch of different versions of it right now, but I think Dr. Daniel Coleman is the one that I read. Just being able to understand our emotions better. And why is this key? Because if not, it can actually become a substitute for faith. I'm going to say it again. Emotionalism can become a substitute for faith. And I want just you to know that what we feel can sometimes affect what we believe. And I'm sorry, belief, the truth of faith, exists whether you feel it or not. Let me just give you an example. Some people think if I don't feel emotional when I pray, then God doesn't exist. God's not listening. God's not there. I'm sorry to say, people go through this a lot in their spiritual life because they're drama kings, they're drama queens, they're dramatic people, and they don't understand their emotions. And therefore, emotions can sometimes replace faith. If I feel good, it's because God is with me. No, I'm sorry. Jesus didn't feel good on the cross. And he even said, "Why have you abandoned me?" And so we can see that in Jesus's humanity, his suffering humanity, there is sometimes a need for feeling. But Jesus had perfect faith because even though he did not feel the presence of God, what did he say? "Into your hands I commend my spirit." He knew that God was there. So when it comes to these moments, let's just now get practical. Number one, become more emotionally intelligent. Two, manage your emotions. There are people who are just much more emotional. There are people in my family who just cry. That's their automatic response. They just cry. Me, I pull back and I just start thinking. I'm like, I cannot be Filipino because Filipinos are usually very emotional people. But that's not true. I'm Filipino, but I think I've been raised by Germans or something because sometimes I have very little emotion. Again, I have theatrics and I know when to turn it on and when to turn it off. And that's why if we get practical, if we understand our emotions, you're not going to confuse that with feelings or faith. There have been times when I've been around a group of people who are like these children here. These children were taught that their emotions are a sign of faith. That, some of them were speaking in tongues. That's a whole nother story. In fact, we did an episode about speaking in tongues way back. And so you can kind of review that one as well. But in this case, the prayers will only work if you are crying. That's why in certain cultures, Middle Eastern cultures in particular, they paid people to wail and cry at funerals. Professional wailers and mourners. And Jesus even makes reference to that, that people are just wailing. And that's even when he met the women at the 8th station. Jesus confronts the sorrowful women. He says, "Do not weep for me or for yourself. Do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children." They were being emotional because in a way, that's what they were supposed to do. But their emotions were not well understood. And Jesus had to clarify it for them. Don't weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. And this emotional intelligence will help us to avoid confusing faith from what I feel. So in many circles, I'll have a chance to pray with people, and some people, depending on their style of praying, some of them are just much more disciplined and hands folded and quiet. Others seem to need to have their hands out in the air, which is great, but doesn't need to be. Just because your hands aren't in the air doesn't mean that you're not praying. Jesus will say about prayer, go to your inner room and talk to your Father in secret. But there are some people who feel rather than know that you can actually pray to God without falling on your knees and having your hands up in prayer. That might be a sign of drama. Might be a sign of drama. And we've got to pay attention to it. I'm not accusing anyone of doing it. If you're one of those people who needs to have your hands up in the air and pray, then do that. I do that. I actually pray with my hands up in the air sometimes. And I do. I kind of like, God, why? And I do that sometimes, oftentimes privately in my chapel, but I sometimes even do that in public prayer. In fact, in the Catholic Church, the priest is supposed to have his hands up in the air at various points. But sometimes I wonder, are the priest's emotions connected to that moment? When he says, Our Father who art in heaven, what are we feeling at that moment? And that's why emotional intelligence will make you ask yourself, are you confusing what you believe and what you know with what you feel? And emotional intelligence will also encourage people like me I'm not always emotional, but I have to know how to tap into it because it can assist in the incarnation of your faith. I'm going to repeat that again. Understanding your emotions can help in the incarnating of your faith. What do I mean by that? Give you a perfect example. Because I was given this book, Emotional Intelligence, I try to practice it all the time, as much as I possibly can, and it does help me in incarnating the faith. What does that mean? It means like when I preach, or even when I'm speaking to you right now, I've got to tap into what am I feeling and making sure that it is helping me to incarnate, flesh out the faith for people. And you'll see the difference between the way, say, I preach and say someone who is just reading the scriptures or reading the Bible or reading their homily like this. The only way that you can be saved is if you profess your love for Jesus Christ, if you are willing to make sacrifices for him, but also just be willing to receive his love. That is what I would call someone who is emotionally not tapped in. And there have been movements even in the church to either tamp down emotion or increase emotion. And that's why we need to understand it in order to be balanced. But it does require us to, first of all, probably take a personality assessment test. It's not an Enneagram, it's a personality test. Just asking yourself, what kind of person are you? Are you extrovert? Are you introvert? I mean, where do you kind of get your energy? People are going to be absolutely surprised that I'm actually a very high introvert. I like to be left alone. When I go on family vacations, guess what? I don't stay in the house. I get a hotel room. I want to be left alone. Whenever I travel, I don't stay in a rectory for a couple reasons, but the most important is because I need to be alone. I need that. People don't believe me. That's fine. That's their drama, not mine. And I've just known myself after 26 years of priesthood. This is kind of what I need. But I also know that I have to turn it on, the theatrics on, but I also want to turn it off. And so, for example, if I come in to an event before the event, right, and we're just going to have a meeting, I might not look like I'm very enthusiastic because frankly, I might be tired. That doesn't mean that I'm not invested in the conversation. It just means it's not time for me to turn on my energy because I need to reserve that, because that's just trying to be emotionally aware. Because if I was on all the time at the meeting, even, I wouldn't have the energy to perform when I'm on stage. And that's why emotional intelligence is necessary. And I don't need to put on an act, nor do we have to be dramatic. And guess what? When I pray for people, I just have to be sincere and authentic. So I'm going to give you those two words because it helps us to avoid drama. Sincerity is getting rid of the fake. And being authentic means rooted in the author. So whenever even like you pray over somebody or when people ask to pray over me, sometimes people when they pray over me, they just like to use a lot of words and they will sometimes I wonder if they know what they're saying. When people like pray over others, like with these kids praying over each other, do they even know what they're saying? Do they even understand their feeling? Do they understand who they are? If you get rid of the wax, which is what the word sincere means, sine cere, without wax, it's because if you had like a statue which was broken, you would put wax in where the cracks are to make it look whole. So it looks good, but it's actually kind of fake. And so people would ask, are you sincere? Sine cere. Are you getting rid of the kind of the fluff, the fake stuff, the stuff that's not authentic? And authentic is rooted in authorship, author, authority. God has to be the authority of your emotions. That's key. And when you stand before God, you get rid of it all. You get rid of everything. So to avoid being dramatic, say like if you're praying over somebody, please don't think that you've got to put on a speech. You don't. You don't have to try to sound like a preacher to try to rise up emotions. You don't. You really don't. You just have to just recognize that you're standing in the presence of God. Get rid of the fake, the wax, the extra stuff, and speak from your heart. And so oftentimes, if people are hyper in their emotions, it's because they don't know how to manage it. They just don't. So it's just, they kind of have to fill in with a lot of words because they need that in order to get the attention of other people. So you have to understand your own temperament, your own personality. Are you a person who is more emotionally or tend towards drama, or are you not? Are you a person who doesn't really understand your feelings, and so your affect is very bland all the time, and people just want you to express how you feel, and so you say I love you that way. Well, that's equally as bad because it just doesn't even feel human. It might be your natural tendency. And so that's why I say first, take a personality test, find out where you are on that spectrum of dramatic or not at all. And find out how to tap into that knowledge so that you can be appropriate, proper to the moment. If I'm at a funeral and I start telling jokes just because I like the attention and I don't want people to feel sad, well, that's your drama kicking in. We have to be able to tap into the emotion and understand it so that my emotion will match the current situation. I mean, Jesus will say, I played you a song, you didn't dance. We sang a dirge and you did not cry because people are just emotionally unintelligent. And I think that that happens in the church quite a bit, especially if you take your faith seriously. Most people who come to church and they don't take their faith seriously, they usually feel nothing, which is the problem. They need to tap into their emotion of what's happening at the Mass. We are literally at Calvary again. How can you not feel something when you know that Jesus is giving himself to you? Problem is, people aren't even tapped into their own emotion. Or people who just cry throughout the entire celebration because they are just so overwhelmed by grief of the Lord that they forget that there is also joy of the resurrection and a hopeful expectation of the good news. That's again another form of why emotionalism, or a lack thereof, is not faith. So, what we have to do now, test the spirits, test what you're feeling, be aware of what you're feeling and test it. Just ask, is this of God? Even if, for example, you're one of these people who just gets very angry in traffic. I can be like that at times, very much like that at times. And I'm just going to tell you one story of how this happened to me, and it just made me ask myself, God, are you just being dramatic right now, Leo? Seriously, what's going on? Well, okay, so I was driving and somebody cuts me off. And I was just like raging mad. And, like I'm dressed like this and I'm raging mad and I pull around and I was going to give that person a dirty look. It was a nun driving the car who cut me off, probably didn't see me being in the midst of a habit. It was a nun. And it was almost as if God says, check your emotions right now. Check your drama. Because the reason why you're actually being a little dramatic right now, Leo, is because you were late. And why were you late? Because you started late. Why were you starting late? Because you let the distractions get you down. You were not focused. It was your schedule was off and it was your fault. And now you're going to blame this nun for cutting in front of you and slowing you down because you're running late. Wow. God, touche. You just made me check my emotions. So, this is what I wanted to offer to you because I think our church is just way too dramatic. Way too dramatic. A lot of drama queens, a lot of drama kings, just a lot of dramatic people. And it's kind of, if it's not being confused with faith, it's getting in the way of faith. It really does. I've seen it happen. It's happened to me. I've perhaps even been a cause of people not coming to know the true God, which is why I'm on here right now telling you we need to get rid of drama, and in particular, Catholic drama. And can I just give you one last thought? I am just so grateful for Pope Leo because he is a man who is very much, it seems, in touch with his emotions. You don't see him acting dramatically. You see him very measured. You don't see him calculating, but you do see an authentic man who knows that he's standing in the presence of God, and what he says and how he acts and even his facial expressions are not only appropriate to incarnating faith, but helping to be a bridge so that others can approach him as someone who can help them grow in their faith, no matter what he or she is feeling. Thank you for watching. I hope that this helps bring about some sort of balance in our own life, and hopefully that we will never confuse our emotions and what we're feeling with what we actually believe. Let me know your thoughts. Like this, please offer your like, subscribing, sharing. By the way, we know that there's a lot of people who do watch and are not yet subscribed. Please do so. And we know that a lot of people who watch and are subscribed, maybe this might be your invitation to please consider supporting us on patreon.com/thefatherleo show so that we can not only improve, we can continue, develop, and grow this channel. And that can only happen with your help. But I hope this helps you. So God bless you, and always stay hungry for God.